Okay, we're going to now complete the last content section of Info 5303. Again, looking at the impact of information technology and information systems on the world of business, and whether that's profit or nonprofit, looking at how it impacts organizations. The last area we're going to look at is this topic of e-commerce. E-commerce is essentially, it's actually one of those things that I don't know that term, how much longer that term is going to exist in our vocabulary. The idea of e-commerce obviously came out of the well, I guess it's the 80s or 90s when we put E in front of anything that became electronic. So electronic commerce is what it was intended to designate. But if you think about it, so much of our commerce now is electronically mediated. When does it stop being e-commerce and just become commerce? So I'm not exactly sure how long that term is going to last, but it still exists today and it's still used as a differentiator. But e-commerce is essentially defined as internet and web-based transactions of business or digitally enabled transactions. And again, if you think of how broad that definition is, it's going to encompass lots of things. The idea of making money through electronically mediated activities actually grew in the mid-90s, starting with advertisements. If you happen to remember back with the early days of the web, search engines and well, just about anything you did had a little banner area of advertisements on that page, and that's basically how the internet got funded. Once it stopped being a federally funded entity and started growing in the commercial sector, that advertisements are really where things started, and you'll still see that today here in a few minutes. It grew exponentially. It even grew a little bit in the recession, although you'll see at the end of this slide, it's a noticeable dip when that happened back in 2008, 2009. But we have to remember, mid-90s is not that long ago. E-commerce and this idea of digitally enhanced transactions is still in its infancy. We have no idea where this is going to go yet. There are a couple of types that I want to cover. Types of commerce in general, and then it maps to e-commerce. So the first one there is business to consumer. This is a corporation or a company selling online to a consumer. Most notable examples are things like Amazon or Apple, or well, anybody that sells something from a website, any company today. Would be a notable example there. It's probably the form that we're most familiar with. Business to business is another type of commerce, and we do see that as well in e-commerce. I'm not thinking of any great examples as I sit here of that, but you hopefully can in your minds think about companies selling things to other companies. I mean, in a way, Amazon is also fits that bill, but I was thinking of something more generally applicable to that area. I just can't think of an example right now. The next one is consumer to consumer, and this is maybe one of the areas that has been impacted the most through the e-commerce market. If you think about what did consumer to consumer commerce look like before the internet? Well, it was the thing that jumps to mind for me is garage sales. In the UK, they call them boot sales because they sell things out of the boot of their car, out of the trunk. But that was really how you sold things to other people, or personal ads in the newspaper. It very minimal impact on the greater community, on the greater commerce of an environment. But now let's look at the electronically mediated version of that, consumer to consumer, would be things like eBay, perhaps. And there is a tremendous amount of revenue that flows in and out of eBay. Etsy is another one of those sites, so that creators of materials use to sell those materials. Now, in many cases, you could make the case that that's a business to consumer, but it's also consumer to consumer. really an area that has grown and changed significantly with the advent of the internet age. And the last area is the text calls it m-commerce, although I have to be frank and say I've never, excuse me, never heard that phrase outside of our textbook. It's just, but the idea is important of mobile commerce, of how much is being sold and purchased through mobile devices, and we'll look at that here in just a minute in more detail. If you look at the big scale of things, you'll see here from this graph that e-com, and this is just, let's see, retail e-commerce revenues grew 15 to 25% over that period of time. So that's from the mid 90s when it was almost nothing to where are we now? 2016, and they've got 2017 and 18 plotted out there based on revenue numbers and estimations. Looks like the rate is even picking up more there. But that's just incredible. You do see the dip in 2008 and 9, where it flatlined actually, or maybe even decreased there for one year through the recession. But it didn't stop very long. The idea of, and this is just business to consumer. So we have moved wholesale as a culture into purchasing things on the internet. I remember it used to be real iffy whether it was safe enough to give your credit card number online, and there are certainly still some concerns with that. I'm not saying it's not anything to be concerned about at all, but I would suggest that it may even be more risky to hand your physical credit card to a server at a restaurant who walks off with it for 10 minutes and comes back than it is to actually put a credit card in a legitimate online retailer today. We have largely gotten over that fear and continue to buy things online in greater quantities. Why has that been so valuable to us as consumers? Well, here's an example. If you look at the sales and marketing process, a set of processes that contribute to the cost of goods. So the typical kind of historical approach has been a manufacturer creates goods. So they create a sweater in this case. They then sell that bulk number of sweaters, 1,000 sweaters, to a distributor. That distributor then sells that on to a retailer, and a retailer then finally a customer. Well, we all know that they have costs and overheads at each one of those steps, and so that sweater, that $10 sweater that it costs to make, it got to be $15 and then $30 and then $48.50 finally at the customer location. Well, as you begin to obviously cut those things out, so we have manufacturers who are able to sell directly to retailers. That would be an example of that the business to business e-commerce. They don't need a distributor. They use the technology to distribute and to increase their view. Remember our example we did of selling things globally versus selling things locally. Using their internet presence or whatever to make themselves known. They can sell directly to a retailer, and that $10 sweater can be sold much more cheaply, say $25. It's more expensive because there are some overhead with the internet. But still, we've now decreased the cost up to the customer down to $40.34 in this example. And then finally, the last one is this business to consumer. Well, we don't really even need a store. Let's just sell our sweater. We're well known enough now, perhaps, that we can sell our sweater directly. I buy more things directly from, is this true? I would say it's at least equal, if not more things from Eddie Bauer online than I do the Eddie Bauer store in the Penn Square Mall, because I trust that transaction. It's easy to do. And in this example, it cut out many of those costs, so this sweater is now $20.45, and it makes it's one of the reasons why e-commerce has grown so significantly. Another one of the reasons why is this idea of digital goods. So in that last example, we were talking about a physical sweater. There's no way for me to get that sweater to you as a consumer, other than literally putting it in a box and mailing it to you, getting it to you some physical transport. But digital goods are not like that. Digital goods, that phrase is intended to cover these ideas of goods that can be sold or delivered over a digital environment, over the internet. So music, video, software, a real change in the newspaper market that they still haven't recovered from. Same thing with periodicals. Once those became digital goods and not physical goods, changed the whole dynamic of their business model, and they're still kind of reeling from that. Books are well along in that transition as well. Um, so let's look at the kind of the details behind that. The cost of producing the first unit is almost the entire cost of the product. Think about that for a minute. If I were to write a book, I'm going to put, let's say, 150 hours into developing the concepts and putting the words down on the page. And let's assume that I can produce that as a book. Well, the next time I sell that book, the next time I want to sell that book, I don't have to go back and reconceptualize it or rewrite it. As opposed to a printed physical material, I still do have to publish a printed one. There's paper costs, there's ink costs, there's manual labor costs, there's all those kind of things. Whereas the second copy of my digital version, what other costs do I have? I click a button and it sends that as well. The marginal cost of the second unit is basically zero. The marginal cost of the third unit is also basically zero, and you can go all the way out. The marginal cost of any subsequent unit is essentially zero. And so another reason why digital goods are really changing that. The cost of delivery over the internet is very low. It's because bandwidth is so cheap now. We can sell, well, whole companies have built their basis of their business on this. Netflix originally was a company that mailed you DVDs because the network and the environment, the worldwide networks weren't fast enough to deliver content fast enough for them, so they send you a DVD. Well, as the networks began to grow, they no longer needed to send you DVDs. They would just stream it to you over the internet, and you got acceptable quality at your home. One of the reasons why that delivery model continues to work. Marketing costs basically the same. Excuse me, I already mentioned this. Industries of digital goods are going over huge changes. You see that in publishers of all kinds, record labels. Many folks are struggling with the impact of the digital goods transformation. Okay, so let's look at a couple of unique features of e-commerce that maybe makes it a little bit different than just regular commerce to the extent that it does. There are, 8 areas that your text talks about. I'm not going to cover each of them in great detail. You have these for your notes and to look up if you need them for your quiz. But just real generally, the marketing of the term ubiquity just means it's everywhere. You can market e-commerce goods in vast locations all over the world because the market space that you're working with is broader in the e-commerce world. Ties into then the global reach. Your boundaries are international, not local where they used to be. Standards. This is I don't mean like products are standards, but a web page that you develop to market a product or to sell a product is going to work here as well as it's going to work in Ethiopia, as well as it's going to work in Russia. The only barrier there is language, and there are tools that translate websites fairly well these days. But all websites work on the same standard, and so therefore you don't have to develop these transactional systems that are unique for multiple environments because they're all built on top of this internet standard. This idea of richness that may be a little bit different. So if you go to a printed catalog for, let's say, a bike shop, I've done this one. Here's an example, a bike rack. I wanted to buy a bike rack for my car and for my bike. You can go to a printed catalog and see, well, there's a picture of the bike rack, yeah, and it's got some written specifications, how size and all those kind of things. That's very nice. But I then went to the website for the company that made it, And not only did I see the picture of the bike rack, but I saw a video of them unboxing and installing the bike rack. And here's how you attach it to your car. And then I saw an interactive area over here where I could put in the make and model of my car, and it would give me specific instructions on how to hang it and which cars it would work with and which ones it wouldn't. A much more rich environment for communicating and for telling me about products that I have in the e-commerce side of the house than I would in a normal commerce environment. Interactivity, I've kind of touched on with that last example as well. Information density, large increases in information density available to the market. Okay, so this is just the example of, you know, a lot more about pricing now than you used to as a consumer. I remember distinctly when Amazon first started coming out with a price checking tool, and you could walk into Best Buy and zap the barcode and see that Amazon was 20% cheaper, or you could actually see the difference. It got so bad at one point that retailers, big box stores like Best Buy and so forth, Circuit City, they stopped putting up the barcodes or things like that because they were losing too much business. We got kind of past that in that technology, but you know a lot more about your purchases now through the e-commerce side of the house than you would have in the past. Personalization and customization, it's very easy to go, we mentioned Etsy the other day, or a little while ago, or many other stores you can go to and personalize. I want that, but I want it in a different color. Well, you give them those specifications, and here it comes, your direction. So lots more customization. And the impact of social technology is really growing. We don't fully understand this yet, what the impact is going to be on commerce, how best to utilize social media. Is it obtrusive? It's just an interesting play. We don't really fully understand yet the best ways to use social technology in the e-commerce market. All right, the last section here is a little bit about business models. Here's some examples of different types of business models that you see in the e-commerce market. Portals, e-tailers, that's just a retailer who sells online. Content, you see this now in one of the ways that say, for example, the newspaper market is trying to adapt to the e-commerce environment, is becoming, they're the content provider. But for example, if you go to the New York Times, I believe you can actually view a certain number of New York Times articles per month for free. But if you exceed that, it's called what's called a paywall. There's a wall that goes up that you can only see the first couple of sentences of a story, and if you want to see the rest of it, you have to log into your account. Well, your account costs you some amount of money. It's a subscription-based service. So they're trying to adapt. You're seeing that a lot of these folks adapting to that market. You see some other examples there of different types of approaches. Not only do you have different approaches, but there's some basic ways you can make money, which each of these companies are looking at. What is the revenue model that I can generate? Advertising still exists. It is still an area where companies are generating revenue. Actually selling products, obviously, I just mentioned a subscription. This idea of free and freemium. You get many accounts. I'm trying to think of an example where you get an account and it's free. But once you're in the account, if you want to add certain features, you see this a lot now in apps that you're buying on your phone. You get the free version, but if you want the filters, these kind of filters, then you have to pay a small charge. That would be the free and premium/freemium versions of that. You see things like transaction fees that would be part of, I guess, how eBay makes their money, and affiliate agreements. This is when you sign up as, so you can sign up, for example, at Amazon, and if you sell things if you go in to your own website and post certain links to, whatever Amazon sells, if they get purchased through your website, you get a very, very small transaction affiliate fee that comes back to you. It's a way of your marketing for that company. All right, last but not least is this idea of mobile commerce. Uh, in 2012, mobile commerce was 10% of all e-commerce. In just the next 2 years, it jumped another 9% of all e-commerce. Fastest growing area. In large part, you see that because of, first of all, the predominance of mobile devices. Those have grown exponentially. There are now probably as many mobile devices as there are human beings on the planet. And because people have multiple mobile devices. Some areas are seeing year-to-year growth as high as 50%. You see things like location-based services. Many of you have met with me on our little interviews over at Starbucks. Well, when I get to Starbucks, my phone has a little icon that pops up on the screen. Based on where my GPS is, it knows I'm at Starbucks and may be prepared to purchase something. So my little card pops up on my phone based on my location. We're seeing more and more of these things. If you go download some apps for Southwest Airlines or others, and you show up at the airport, well, your boarding pass is going to pop up on your screen. It's things that it knows where you are, and because of that, it can predict some of the activities you may be taking part in. Seeing large increases in that. Banking and financial services, wireless and retail, more and more purchases being made online, and games and entertainment is a huge area. I'm not into that world myself, but it's where a lot of that content is growing. In fact, the main areas of growth it tells us here is in just retail sales and digital content are huge areas of increased growth. Here's a graph that shows us, let's see, well, it's just showing a rather consistent revenue growth. In 2016, in 2015, it was predicting something like, I'm going to guess that's 75 maybe billion dollars in revenue. And that jumps up this year estimated to, that's $95 billion. So another $20 billion in sales predicted year to year. And that looks like it's fairly linear growth, at least out to 2018. This is an area of huge opportunity and huge growth in the e-commerce market. All right, that's it for the content for this lecture and this course. You'll also find an assignment that I'm going to give you in the content section after you've watched all these videos. Hopefully you'll see an assignment. That assignment was what we'll use to generate your participation scores and participation points for this week. And then obviously be in touch with me by email if you have any questions about our final week 7 and our group presentations and the final itself. Thanks.